I decided to make a video demonstrating and documenting this antique watch dial that I found that is made by Olfan and Montandon, and it is dated to approximately the 1790s, 1790 to 1800. I'm tentatively setting the date as 1795 because of my research, I've been able to establish that the pair were in business at that time, as one of the sites that I found cites them both. And I will provide the background research at the end of this video, if not in places. So basically, this watch is an ultra rare watch as far as Montandon watches are concerned. This is the only one that I've seen, and it's definitely one of the earliest Montandon watches I've seen. So this would have been made during the French Revolution. About the watch itself, it's a Verge Fusée escapement, which is what's left of it anyways, is a painted enamel dial. And the fact that it specifically says Clermont, I've been able to locate genealogically with sources that this was made by Balthazar Montandon, who was of the Montandon Blaise Léon branch, and he is listed in the book as Montandons of Lyon. So apparently he was moving between Clermont-Ferrand, Lyon, but him, like his partner, both had dual citizenship, both Swiss and French. And the partner Olfan, he's a little bit harder to track down, but I believe that he was André Olfan. There is an exact replica of this dial at the British Museum. It only reads Olfan at Clermont, but it's listed as André Olfan. And the genealogical information on André is much more difficult to come by. He may have been born under the name Abel, as they seem to share the same birth year in 1763. Now, Balthazar was born in 1765, so they were around the same age, only 2 years apart. And Andre at least, but probably both, were Freemasons, and they seem to have done a lot of similar. Seem to have been involved in a lot of similar things. Now, concerning André Olfan, I've been able to locate many different examples of his works, and I can provide pictures of those. His watches are still extant, and he seems to have been quite prolific. Apparently, he was a Lumiere, which is like a head in the Masonic organizations, where he was, at least in 3 different places, he was an organizer and leader. And he seems to have been friends with Dr. Guillotine, and also a friend of his apparently accompanied Robespierre to the guillotines in Paris during the Revolution, during the Terror. So it's interesting. Dr. Guillotine himself was a Mason as well, a Freemason, and he seems to have frequented, possibly been from that area of Lyon, Clermont-Ferrand area. Olfan was, like his father, a watchmaker, Germain, and I can see that Germain has done clocks that are basically statue clocks, Louis XV era clocks, and he may have been a customer. Now, Olfan is mentioned in multiple places, and it seems to be he's a hard character to track down, but his name does come up more often than Balthazar Montandon's. He apparently was a lieutenant in the 4th Battalion outside of Lyon. He was born southeast of Lyon, so there's a message from him saluting the head of a textile company, a factory. And it's interesting because the mention of Balthazar Montandon and Andre Alfan together, apparently as Freemasons, they would have been really interested in supporting the revolution, as they were pro-Jacobin, moderately pro-Jacobin, but anyways, they were supporting reforms. They saw it as reforms, and they were asked to pay 5,000 French livres to acquire textiles, to make gray textiles, to make vests for prisoners of war and enemies of the revolution, which was about a third of the budget for that project. But it's interesting, again, the textile link with Alfan here. So there may have been some sort of back deals. But and he also is mentioned around 1793 as appealing to the mayor of Lyon for the right for the Huguenots to gather religiously. And he seems to have been, like Balthasar, a Swiss Huguenot, but his family came out of Geneva, whereas Balthasar's family came out of Neuchâtel from La Brevine. And it's interesting that within a couple of years, in 1795, Balthasar Montandon is mentioned as the person who is appealing to the mayor of Clermont-Ferrand for the exact same thing. He was representing 25 Swiss Huguenots who wanted to gather legally in Clermont-Ferrand, and he apparently seems to have been successful. With regard to the genealogy of Balthasar, I think I mentioned that he is of the Blaise-Léon Montandons, and this branch is the most illustrious branch of Montandons, at least as far as watchmaking is concerned. And he would have been schooled and trained in watchmaking profession before leaving from La Brevine and leaving Switzerland. And you have to remember at the time that Neuchâtel was a separate principality that was basically loyal to the Prussian king. It's a remnant of the Holy Roman Empire areas and sort of the Kingdom of Burgundy. But this was not yet part of Switzerland or France yet. It had drifted back and forth into Switzerland. But at this time, it's still separate. However, the border seems to be fairly porous, and people can, especially from Western Switzerland area, drift back and forth, especially knowing French, having French as a language. And it seemed that many people had dual citizenship, and I believe his children were even registered as Swiss citizens as well. So he had 3 children, the first of which was Felicity, who was born in 1795, and she died in infancy. However, his next child, Auguste Laurent, it turns out, became a very prominent minister. He started ministering in 1827, I believe, but he went on to become the main Reformed Church minister in Paris at the Louvre, and he was there from 1849 till his death in 1876, and he's written a lot of pamphlets and literature on the religious education and how it's important. He was a liberal, he was a moderate liberal in his organization. Now, the other child of Balthasar was Annette Alexis, and he was also an interesting character. He didn't follow in the watchmaking tradition like his father. However, he did manage to become a professor at the University of Lyon. He was known for various articles that he published in poems. He seems to have been interested in history, archaeology, natural history, and entomology. And apparently he discovered his own beetle or bug of some kind. And the last he is heard of is in 1847, when he apparently died in Asia Minor. And quoting one of my sources, Les Montandon by Frederick J. Montandon. He cites that he was killed in a clearing accident in Asia Minor, and he was apparently clearing forest. And the place I've located it's in the very northeast corner of Turkey by the Georgian border. Very forested, heavily rugged area, very like Switzerland actually, but really rugged terrain. And he apparently died there. And I did correspond. I did manage to confirm this death in a newspaper announcement as well, and the place was so-called Rizek, but that's it. Other close relatives of Balthasar who were also watchmakers is another man who went to Denmark and started crafting watches there. That was H.L. Montandon, Henri Louis Montandon. His father apparently went before him, and he was a justice, and apparently he was assassinated there in 1796 or 1797, and the body was returned to Neuchâtel. But then Henri Louis stays on in Copenhagen, where he was a master watchmaker, and he had his store or shop was in the center of town. I think I located the area. It's almost on an island, and several of his watches are still floating around. One I've seen from 1820 is internally in excellent condition. It's a silver watch, but inside it's pristine, like it looks like brand new basically. So it's an excellent example of his work. But he seems to have been another early Montandon watchmaker. Concerning André Olfin, he seems to disappear totally by about 1800. Perhaps he went off to the wars, in one of Napoleon's wars, or he seems to have definitely been running more of a risky lifestyle in the way he was very forward in his Masonic activities, and he definitely moved in. He was one of the movers and shakers at that time, so it's entirely possible. And he was a volunteer in the 4th Battalion as a lieutenant. So once again, it's entirely possible that something of this nature happened to him, because he totally disappears from the records. Balthasar lived until 1839, so he had a much longer life, and he seems to have been more a supporter of the Huguenot religion than anything I can deduce from the Masonic activity that he may have been associated with at the time. That was more or less, especially with the craftspeople, a type of early networking, especially in the 18th century in France. It was growing quite big, and Lyon was, I believe, the second largest Masonic location in France after Paris. So that's basically all the history I was able to glean from this watch dial, and I hope it was informative.